All right, good morning, good morning. We are going to get fired up here this morning. Continuing on now as we go into the practical applications of a Christian worldview and see how all that applies and what we can learn there. I printed up a few more notes if you need them, and I think we all try to keep the notes like one per household, but everybody can have their own fill in the blank if they want, obviously. Tom, would you open us this morning?
Heavenly Father, Lord, we just so grateful to be here today. It's good to have Paul amongst us. We pray for each and every person that's here to come in with a heavy heart, a gleeful heart, and maybe the Spirit within each one of us mold and blend and just minister. And it's such a rich campus. Just seems to be growing by leaps and bounds in the Spirit. And we just pray for that unity and guidance and leadership and grace and all the love that you have to offer. And we just sometimes don't take the time to appreciate that, Lord. And we pray that you'd be with our services, each and every one of them, as we're looking for extra help in all areas, and look forward. Lord, just bless us this day. Help us to be grateful for what we have and not to resent and wish we had more, wish we were more like this person, that person, Lord. You created each one of us individually, Lord, and you've allowed us to go through whatever life has brought us, either to teach us or to encourage us or help us to, in the future, at your pace, at your time, to be a blessing to others who may be going down the same road that you went, whether that be a nurturing one or one that just seemed like one bump in the road after the other. So Father, be with us now. Be with Brother Harry as he shares what he's put so many hours and time into. We thank you richly, Lord. And it's in Jesus' blessed name that we ask it. Amen.
Amen. All right, last week we looked at truth and the necessity of truth being an absolute. Truth can't be a floating type of thing. It has to be something, and as we kind of saw, truth has to be something outside of you. It's got to be something outside of your opinion. So this whole concept that we see floating around of my truth, well, that's your truth or that's my truth, that just absolutely cannot work. Kind of reviewing that a little bit, this quote that I put up last week, there are no absolutes, are what philosophers call self-referentially what? Or a self-refuting statement. They are self-referential, what? They are incoherent. There are no absolutes. If you make that statement, what did that statement just do to itself? That's an absolute statement. It's self-refuting. We looked at three theories of figuring out truth. And you'll recall that those are reminiscent of the very beginning of this course when we talked about just figuring out worldview in itself and testing our worldviews. So the coherence theory. The weakness of this view is that what kind of statement can be shown to fit with what set of statements or beliefs? Anything. As long as it agrees with what you believe, then all of a sudden it's true. Well, you can believe anything, and therefore you can make a statement that coheres or lines up with or agrees with that. So the coherence theory fails because anything can be true. Because as long as you base it on something that you believe, whether that belief is accurate or not. The pragmatic theory. And what is pragmatic anyway? What does that term mean? Just in general. Practical, useful. Can I use it? So the pragmatic theory, what makes something true is its what in accomplishing desired goals in life. Yeah, how useful is it? If I can use it, therefore it's true. But kind of like I gave that example with the ladder, if the wall is 12 foot and the ladder is only 10 foot, Can I still use it to get up over a 12-foot wall? Probably. Being 6 foot myself, that gives me 2 feet off the top of the ladder. Yeah, I could probably, it becomes useful. But if I say the ladder is 12 feet, is it? No, it's only 10. But it's pragmatic, it's practical, it's useful. So the problem with that theory is, again, what can be said to be true under the pragmatic theory? Anything. As long as you can make it useful, you can use it. So that fails, because obviously not everything and anything can be true. That left us with the correspondence theory. What makes something true is its correspondence with what? Reality. Remember, all worldviews, one of the basic elements of every worldview is what? What is ultimately real? Ultimate reality. And so the correspondence theory says, does my statement of what is true, does it correspond with something that is real? So if I say it's a 12-foot ladder, I better be able to measure it, and it comes out to be 12 feet. There it's real. Now, again, if you recall, now I can take correspondence theory or coherence theory and bring it back to use. Because now true statement should agree with what's ultimately real. It should cohere with that. I can use pragmatic theory. It should be useful to believe something that's true, if it's based on something that's ultimately real. So those other two theories, they just are not the primary. I can use them, but they have to come under the correspondence theory. Does it correspond with what's ultimately real? So now we're going to move out of ultimate truth and look at ultimate morality, or moral absolutes. Kind of the sister aspect of truth. Let me give you a quote by Dorothy Sayers. In the world, it's called tolerance. It's interesting that some of the most intolerant people are generally the ones that are calling for tolerance on their ideals. It's called tolerance, but in hell, it's called despair. The sin that believes in nothing, cares for nothing, seeks to know nothing, interferes with nothing, enjoys nothing, hates nothing, finds purpose in nothing, lives for nothing, and remains alive because there is nothing for which it will die. That nihilism, remember that term I gave you, that idea of nothingness, which is where the false worldviews and these false ideas of truth will always take you, is into a realm of nothing. And it leaves a person with a person that will die for nothing, because they're not based on anything ultimately real. So let's take a look at moral absolutes. I've got another audio for you this morning that I want to start off with. So listen carefully. Apparently, we've got to do some sort of a patch between my computer, which is very new and update, and an very old projector here to get it to show you the video. So just listen.
There's one simple vision hack anyone can use to improve
After
vision.
the commercial.
So you can say goodbye to your optometrist for good. Did you know that?
I'm going to argue for the existence of God from the premise that moral good and evil really exist. They are not simply a matter of personal taste, not merely substitutes for I like and I don't like. Before I begin, let's get one misunderstanding out of the way. My argument does not mean that atheists can't be moral. Of course, atheists can behave morally, just as theists can behave immorally. Let's start then with a question about good and evil. Where do good and evil come from? Atheists typically propose a few possibilities. Among these are evolution, reason, conscience, human nature, and utilitarianism. I will show you that none of these can be the ultimate source of morality. Why not from evolution? Because any supposed morality that is evolving can change. If it can change for the good or the bad, there must be a standard above these changes to judge them as good or bad. For most of human history, more powerful societies enslaved weaker societies and prospered. That's just the way it was, and no one questioned it. Now we condemn slavery. But based on a merely evolutionary model, that is, an ever-changing view of morality, who is to say that it won't be acceptable again one day? Slavery was once accepted, but it was not therefore acceptable. And if you can't make that distinction between accepted and acceptable, you can't criticize slavery.
Now think about that. Slavery was once accepted. It was normal in a lot of societies over history. But we don't say that it's acceptable. We have to be able to make a distinction between those two concepts. Because a society accepts it, does not make it morally acceptable.
And if you can make that distinction, you are admitting to objective morality. And what about reasoning? While reasoning is a powerful tool to help us discover and understand morality, it cannot be the source of morality. For example, criminals use reasoning to plan a murder, without their reason telling them that murder is wrong. And was it reasoning or something higher than reasoning that led those Gentiles who risked their life to save Jews during the Holocaust? The answer is obvious. It was something higher than reasoning, because risking one's life to save a stranger was a very unreasonable thing to do. Nor can conscience alone be the source of morality. Every person has his own conscience, and some people apparently have none. Heinrich Himmler, chief of the brutal Nazi SS, successfully appealed to his henchmen's consciences to help them do the right thing in murdering and torturing millions of Jews and others. How can you say your conscience is right and Himmler's is wrong if conscience alone is the source of morality?
Again, conscience. And you study history, and he's right. Himmler, in speaking and hyping up his SS troops, said, I appeal to your conscience. This is the right thing to do to wipe this people out. We are seeing the same ideals being put forth on our college campuses. Again, this is the right thing to do. I'm appealing to your conscience. This is a moral choice to wipe out a people group because of a supposed evil. So conscience, a person's conscience, again, cannot be the basis for morality.
The answer is you can't. Some people say human nature is the ultimate source of morality. But human nature can lead us to do all sorts of reprehensible things. In fact, human nature is the reason we need morality. Our human nature leads some of us to do real evil, and leads all of us to be selfish, unkind, petty, and egocentric. I doubt you would want to live in a world where human nature was given free rein. Utilitarianism is the claim that what is morally right is determined by whatever creates the greatest happiness for the greatest number. But to return to our slavery example, if 90% of the people would get great benefit from enslaving the other 10%, would that make slavery right? According to utilitarianism, it would. We've seen where morality can't come from. Now let's see where it does come from. What are moral laws? Unlike the laws of physics or the laws of mathematics, which tell us what is, the laws of morality tell us what ought to be. But like physical laws, they direct and order something. And that something is right human behavior. But since morality doesn't exist physically, there are no moral or immoral atoms or cells or genes, its cause has to be something that exists apart from the physical world. That thing must therefore be above nature or supernatural. The very existence of morality proves the existence of something beyond nature and beyond man. Just as a design suggests a designer, moral commands suggest a moral commander. Moral laws must come from a moral lawgiver. Well, that sounds pretty much like what we know as God. So the consequence of this argument is that whenever you appeal to morality, you are appealing to God, whether you know it or not. You're talking about something religious, even if you think you're an atheist. I'm Peter Kraft, Professor of Philosophy at Boston College for Prager University.
So if you have the notes, you have the hyperlink website there that you can go in and type in and watch it. He's got some little illustrations that come in behind it, but you can hear and get the information just fine. We can't get morals from all the things that we think we get morals from. It's got to be something outside of us, much like truth is, that it's out there. And as the professor put out, when you are appealing to morality, you are essentially appealing to God, something supernatural. Just as there are different views of truth and knowledge, there are different views of ethics, and therefore different understandings about morality and various behaviors. But before a person looks at the specifics of right and wrong, which we will later this morning, ethical understandings affect how a person views the world. Again, we're talking about worldview. That's the whole purpose of this course, is your worldview. How do I view the world? In the same way that the existence of absolute truth should guide our pursuit of knowledge, because we want to learn something that is true, the existence of moral absolutes should guide us in our pursuit of ethical understanding. What is right, what is wrong, and why is it right, why is it wrong? There is wisdom in thinking of morality as objective and universal. As thinking about morality as being something outside of my opinions. So ethics itself is the systematic study of moral principles that is concerned mainly with beliefs and judgments regarding right and wrong. There's a nice definition, ethics. Systematic study of moral principles, trying to figure out what's to be able to judge right and wrong. There are really two ideas, or a couple of things that come in here. Careful ethical reasoning and reflection helps a person understand the difference between right and wrong. Those of you that are parents, when you were trying to teach your kids, you wanted them to understand the difference between right and wrong, both in principle and in situations, knowing full well that you could not go through every possible situation with your kids. But if you could get them to understand the principle, they could then make the right judgment call themselves when you weren't standing there with them. Over time, choosing to do what is right rather than what is wrong facilitates the development of moral character. Think like going to the gym. Repeatedly lifting those weights, doing those exercises will build muscle over time. It doesn't happen the first day you go to the gym. Generally, the first day you go to the gym, you're thinking, no, I'll never do this again. But if you continue, you see the development. The same thing here is with moral character. The more you choose to do what is right, the more you develop your moral character. So that when you come to a new situation, it just happens. Thus, the term ethics relates chiefly to thought about right and wrong, whereas morality relates more directly to a person's choices. So ethics is kind of the thinking idea, and morality is the practical application of ethics. It's what you do or don't do. Does that make sense? They're related. Ethics is the thinking, morality is the doing. Now, there are the foundational assumptions about moral values. There's really two main ideas. Remember, we saw subjective ideas of truth last week. Well, that comes up here in morals as well. Ethical subjectivism. This is a variety of moral relativism that holds that moral values are relative to a person's opinions and their preferences. So now morals are based on what you like and don't like. What's the problem with that? It's the same problem with that thing about having all the different versions of truth. How many people are there in the world, roughly? 8 billion. So how many different ideas of morals could we possibly have in the world? About 8 billion. Does that seem like a possible problem?
It could be.
What is moral to you, immoral to somebody else? You think it's immoral, yet they think it's perfectly moral. To go and take your stuff because, well, you have plenty that you worked for and saved for and budgeted for, but they don't have it, so they should have it. And in their idea of morals, that's moral. Do we see this kind of argument being put forth in politics today? Absolutely. That's moral relativism. Cultural relativism, another variety, holds that moral right and wrongs are determined by the moral standards that are accepted by the majority of people. You just heard the good professor describe that. So that if it's morally acceptable or does good for a vast majority of people, then society says, well, then it's okay. What's the problem with that? What example did he give? Slavery. If it benefits 90%, great. Except unless you're a part of the 10% that are being forced to work for the other 90.
That would be like 10 men cast away on an island after a shipwreck and then denying voting that the one dies so that we can...
Yeah, your lunch. Yeah.
So obviously that one is going to object.
Yeah, that's called utilitarianism. And we see a lot of utilitarianism. You're going to see a lot of it. It's never called that, but you're going to see a lot of utilitarianism built into, as we're going into yet another political time and politics, of what is the most good for the most people. Utilitarianism, though, fails as a moral basis. Because unless it's 100%, there's a problem.
Well, unfortunately, we're not seeing the reverse of that too. That what's good for 2% of the population should affect the entire population.
Yeah, well, that's just reverse utilitarianism. It's still the same concept, just done in reverse. Both of these views state that moral values don't exist independent of your preference and opinions. It's what you like and want. Proponents of moral relativism assert that because moral values are relative in this way, then it's wrong for a person to interfere in the moral lives and decisions of other people. And this is where you get the reverse process, where it's wrong for you to say that these 2% that are doing something you find that are totally morally reprehensible should now become the norm for the rest of society. Because that is absolutely as valuable as well. Moral relativism is very, very popular for two primary reasons. The first of which is that people have a strong desire, generally, to avoid judging other people and the moral decisions they make. It's easy to see that a whole lot of moral decisions are very complex and difficult to make. Would you agree with that? Sometimes it's not just a simple, black, right. Sometimes, wow, this can be very complex. There's a lot of moving parts. It can be difficult. It's easy to see that a lot of these decisions, because they're difficult, that people recognize that they are very deeply personal. And so I don't want to get in and judge them because, I haven't walked a mile in their moccasins. Because it's impossible for one person to really understand what it's like for another person to live through personal situations. Hear me when I say that. It's impossible for you to understand what another person is going through, even if you've gone through something similar. You know that I buried my third daughter. I can talk to somebody who's going through that, but I will never understand exactly what they are going through, because the way they were raised, the way they're thinking, the details of it is different. Might it be similar? Absolutely. And so we tend to I don't want to judge somebody's moral decision because I realize that I don't completely understand what they're going through, even if I can get relatively close. We get statements like, who am I to judge that person's decisions, what's right or wrong? But when that same reasoning is expanded and applied to entire cultures, this desire to avoid being judgmental is even more pronounced. How can we judge the practices of people who live far away with an entirely different cultural context? Here's another reason why moral relativism is popular. I didn't say it's right, I said it's popular. It motivates people to embrace some variety of moral relativism because of moral autonomy. I want to be in charge of my moral decisions. What story from the Bible does this sound like? That would be the Garden of Eden. I will be the moral arbiter of what is right and wrong. See, nothing is new. Nothing is different. We still want to eat from the tree. Just as most people don't want to judge the moral decisions that other people make, they don't want to be judged. I don't want you to tell me what I'm doing is wrong. Each person has the desire to live an independent moral life, making their own decisions based on their own moral sense of what is right and wrong, without someone else imposing their sense of morality. Welcome to the tree. A person motivated by the desire for autonomy might say something like, I get to make my own decisions, and you have no right to tell me how to live. Any grandparents in here who have adult children? Does that sound relatively familiar? And now I'm going to ask you, do you remember saying that to your parents? No. We always want to look at the last generation, and invariably, one or two of us said something along that line to our own parents.
We just thought it.
Yeah, we didn't say it. No, we said it and we got kicked out of the house.
Yeah, absolutely. As attractive as moral relativism is, much like trying to be relativistic towards truth, it's not rational. It doesn't make any sense when you absolutely think about it and take it to its logical extreme. It's not livable. You're constantly in a state of flux if you're trying to go into moral relativism because you have no foundation to stand on. So every time you come to a new situation, you're having to go, well, now what? Well, now what? Well, now what? To see why it's not rational, consider again what the ethical subjectivist is saying. Moral values are a matter of opinion, so you have no right to tell me how to live my life. What is wrong with that statement?
You can't live your life without interfering with somebody else's.
Probably not. It's an absolute statement. Therefore, it contradicts itself and is no longer true. Moral values are a matter of opinion. That's an absolute statement. Okay, well then that means you have an opinion, I have an opinion. Which means you have no right to tell me how to live my life. Well, no, that just self-refuted. If it's just a matter of opinion, then of course I do.
And that's you saying your truth is not my truth.
This is exactly what we're seeing all over the internet. Yep. And you can't tell me your truth. But see, that is a self-refuting statement. When you apply any logic to it, the statement collapses itself. To think about this statement, it is self-refuting. If moral values are really a matter of personal opinion, then the claim that you have no right to tell me how to live my life is just an opinion of the speaker, so nobody has the obligation to live by it. Well, that's just your opinion. That I don't have the right to tell you my opinion. Yes, see, the argument collapses on itself, and yet you will hear this argument made again and again and again and again. On the other hand, it is objectively true that if it is objectively true that you have no right to tell me how to live my life, then moral values cannot be simply a matter of personal opinion. That means they have to be an objective standard that's outside of you and your thinking. And if there's an objective standard outside of you and your thinking, whoops. So this argument, when it's made, falls apart. Or it points to an absolute standard that everybody needs to go figure out what that standard is. This is why I love to have discussions with some of these folks. This is the same rational problem faced by those relativistic views of truth that we looked at last week. In addition to the rational problem, I said it's not livable. Think about how this applies to your own life. If you believe that moral values are a matter of personal opinion, then guess what? This always disrupts my class. You don't get to complain when the person cuts you off in line. You don't get to complain when they cheat or steal from you, because it was in their opinion that it was okay. So you got, well, that was their opinion, so all right, cut in front of me.
Really, it was just their desire to do what they wanted to do.
Pretty much. Because if moral values are just a matter of a personal opinion, then there is no objective right and wrong. So if it's okay for them, you've been standing in line for 3 hours waiting to get to your turn, and then all of a sudden somebody comes and cuts in front of you, you don't get to go, "Hey!" I may or may not yell at traffic. And oftentimes I'm reaching for my red and blue light switch, and it's not there in my car.
I know how that goes.
Come on,
And what's the
But
most
really-
satisfying thing you get to do when you're working patrol?
yeah.
Like somebody else.
Yeah. But if there's no moral objective standard, then it's a matter of personal opinion, and you get to quit complaining. Well, people aren't going to do that. So there's got to be a moral objective standard out there. You also can't complain about things that you feel are injustices. Because matters of justice would simply, again, be a matter of personal preference and opinion. So you don't get to go look at the world and say, that's not fair, that's unjust. Because now it's a matter of personal opinion. And we have utilitarianism coming in. Are more people enjoying this than not? Okay, well then here we go. Which is the problem with democracy, is that it is a utilitarian-based concept. I am not anti-democracy. But to a society that has no moral absolutes, then it can be used to take us down very dark and awful paths. Most people tend to think that some things are objectively and universally wrong. Give me your opinion. What is something that you think that no matter where you went on this planet is universally or objectively wrong?
My mom.
While you might think your mom is, I would imagine that if you went to my friends in Zambia, they don't know your mom, so that's probably not true. Stealing. Generally, a lot of places have laws against it. Some are more harsh than others. You might lose your hand. What's another one? Murder. That's the one I'm fishing for, because that's always a guarantee. Murder. Adultery, not so much.
Not so much adultery. Some societies where it's
But murder, you go anywhere on the planet, and there's this universal concept that that's wrong.
Except
Now,
in college
people will redefine what murder is, but the concept of murder they find universally wrong. And there are others. Even though there's moral disagreement in the world, there are some things that no matter what they believe, they think these are wrong. For example, it's not morally permissible to torture others for fun. This is not really a matter of personal opinion or cultural customs. You go anywhere and people say torturing just for fun, all over the planet, people go, no. Now, if you're trying to elicit information, stuff, then, but again, now we're going into moral relativism. For most people think that that there's a moral obligation to promote human flourishing. Most people also believe that it is acceptable to judge the moral decisions of others and force them to live in certain ways. How do I know that's true?
most societies have laws.
Not only most societies, all societies have laws that are a judgment of somebody's moral behavior and force them to live in certain ways. Now, it may be different, but society, human thought, is that there are it's okay to judge people's moral behavior and force them to act or not act in certain ways, because we all have laws. Many people think that society should actively work to stop murders, prevent people from stealing. So you guys hit what is normally found. To stop human trafficking. Most people think that a lifestyle of charity, helping those in need and service to others, is better than a life of selfishness. And again, this is kind of an absolute that's out there. Almost every religion on the planet teaches some form of this. Both of these, actually. All of these types of judgments, though, can only be made if moral values are both objective and universal. That they are right and wrong everywhere at all times. Otherwise, we delve into moral relativism, and then everything is up for grabs. And again, if it's relativistic, like the professor put out, we say that slavery is wrong. But if it's relative, what could happen in the future? It could change, and all of a sudden it would say, it's okay. That anybody who goes to a Baptist church should be forced to give up all their stuff and work for the betterment of everybody else for free. Yeah. So, this moral relativism, we have truth and morals both pointing to something that is objective and outside of us. So that comes down then to the question, and something that you as parents and grandparents have tried to do, is how do we know right from wrong? My former youth pastor wrote a little book with that very title. How do I know right from wrong? Even when it's acknowledged that moral values have to be objective and universal, people still recognize that moral decisions are difficult. And they can be, because there can be 1,000 different little moving parts. In a whole lot of situations, it's not always easy to choose the right thing to do. But the problem of knowing right from wrong is even worse if moral values are only shown to be relative to a particular culture or situation. Then it gets worse.
One of my favorites is what some businesses teach, situational ethics.
Oh yeah. Oh, I rant and rave on situation ethics. I think I've told you about my old neighbor. Her watchword for everything was, "It depends." We were young marrieds. It was kind of a new housing development, small houses. So it was, starter homes. So everybody in there had been married for, 5 years or less type of thing, and babies and whatnot. So we would all get together, have little game nights. And typical, a lot of these games were all of these kind of questioning things and everybody talking and laughing. Her response to everything, and it became a neighborhood joke, was, well, we'd ask her, and well, it depends. She stood on nothing. How do we know right from wrong? Can you imagine going to every situation in your life and having to go like this constantly? Well, now what? Well, now what? Well, now what? Yet there's thousands and millions of people who do that. Who are constant, and they are frozen sometimes and not able to make a decision because,
That's how accidents are happening too.
Doesn't the consequence give you a good feeling of right from wrong if you think
It
of the
can.
consequence?
It can.
Like your kids. They think, if I go to that party and my mom finds out, I'm good.
Well, there is that. But then you have the weighing of the consequence. My oldest daughter, and if you're watching this, Stephanie, I'm telling this story. She would weigh the consequence. I want you to know, well, what happens if I do it? Initially, we'd tell her, you'll get a couple of swats. And you could watch her mind going,
It might be worth it.
we had to quit telling her what the consequence was. Cindy would say, it's going to be bloody and horrible and you're not going to be able to move for a month. And let her imagination run away with it. So consequences can work, but not necessarily. And in my former profession, I had a lot of people that weighed the consequences and went, I'm going to go ahead. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do it, because even if I get caught, three hot, three hots in a cot, I'm okay, and I'll take my chances.
Consequences also lead you right back to situational ethics.
Exactly.
It's okay for me to do this because it's going to benefit my business in that way.
Yep.
It doesn't matter whether it's moral or not. It benefits me in some fashion.
Which is the pragmatic theory. Is it useful to me? So, just like a relativistic view of truth leads to nihilism, leads to nothing, with respect to knowledge, relativistic views of morality lead ultimately to moral nihilism. Nothing. There is no moral absolute. When I start going into relativistic thinking on my morals, it's going to lead me to a path where there are none. Nothing. There is nothing that is moral. It's all a matter of...
Harry?
Yes.
Nihilism equals nothing?
Uh-huh.
That's a new term for me. I learned something in Sunday school.
So this can be seen wherever there is moral disagreement. If a moral choice has to be made, and there are two opinions about which choice is correct, how can those two options be judged?
The biggest guy wins.
Yeah, well, that's what usually happens. Who has the biggest sword? If moral values are simply a matter of opinion, then no one would be able to determine the right thing to do. Then it becomes a power struggle. Who has the biggest gun? Who has the most background? Who has the most votes behind them? The deepest pockets. All of the above. This happens in churches all the time. You say no, but yes, it does. Remember, I was president of the St. Patrick's Day Parade and Fair Committee. My background is Irish. The fun thing about the Irish is you can have 4 Irishmen in a room and you have 6 opinions. Don't know where that math comes from, but it's also true. So, but if there are no moral absolutes, then you're constantly trying to figure it out. Do you have a hand up back there? No? Yes?
So where does hypocrisy fit into this?
Hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is saying I believe in something and then intentionally doing something different. Again, now remember, way back to the beginning of this, I said that worldview that no one, let me repeat that, no one consistently lives their worldview. Everybody steps in and out of their worldview generally because of pragmatism, what's useful to me at the time, my own desires, I'm going to go back and eat from that tree. And so we step in and out of our worldviews. And that's where we end up getting that sort of concept. Good question. So if moral values are not objective, then there's no basis for moral knowledge. If moral values are not objective and outside of me and my thinking, then we don't need to be studying morals. Because then it comes back to a matter of opinion. So then everybody's opinion becomes equal and, oh, here we go loop-de-loop. Now we get into armed camps. This is where churches split. This is where 2 Christians can go.
Should never happen.
One of the reasons that moral questions are difficult is that moral values cannot be discovered empirically. What do I mean by that? Well, there are no scientific experiments or observations that can reveal which moral values ought to be upheld. You can't go into the lab and decide telling the truth and test it in a lab situation and have it come out. You can't discover them empirically. You can't write an algorithm for them. It's easy to see that science is very ill-equipped to solve moral problems because it only focuses on observing, measuring, and describing the natural physical world. That's what science does. So it cannot help you with a moral problem. When an immoral act is observed, let's go with murder. Let's go with the big one. You can observe much about what is going on. This is where I used to roll in. Who the person is, what do they look like? Male, female, old, young, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, tattoos, marks, glasses, scar. You can describe physical characteristics. You can describe what they're doing. They had a big knife and they go whip, 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 whip. You know. All right? You can tell me where it happened. It happened at 51st and Baseline behind the Circle K. It was an old white guy who got cut off in traffic. He had a big knife. He's going, you know. But you cannot observe all of that and tell me that what was happening was wrong. Can you? You can describe all of the activities, who was involved, but you cannot empirically tell me that what that was happening was wrong. Just the description of the activity happening. For people with a Christian worldview, and when you see in my outline when it says Christians, I'm saying Christian worldview. All right? Same thing. Interchangeable concept. So, people with a Christian worldview believe that ethics should be grounded in absolute principles of right and wrong. Something that is outside of me and my thinking and my opinions. And that is then based on the unchanging nature of God, who determined right and wrong. That's revealed in the Bible, and then of course is best revealed in the person of Jesus himself, who constantly and consistently and 100% only did what was right. Did not have to go, Additionally, Christians, people with a Christian worldview, believe that guilt and shame then can be taken away in the forgiveness that is offered through Jesus Christ. Because now that penalty, the guilt and shame that comes with it, is removed. It is gone. And yet, all too often I see, and in my counseling, I have Christians that want to go back and pick up that shame and pick up that guilt and hold on to it. Because of this, Christians see themselves as imperfect yet forgiven imitators of Jesus. I'm going to imitate that person who always did it right. Imperfectly, going to mess up, going to make mistakes. I know I'm going to make a mistake because I got out of bed. Now it's a guarantee. But I am a forgiven imitator. And as I learn to do what is right, like going to the gym, that will facilitate my doing right muscle for the next time. And the next time. Now think about your basic, business graph where you'd have, we're making profits and then we have a little downturn and then things are going well again and then a couple of trucks break and then what are you looking for over time? You're looking for a movement up. Does that not mean there's going to be some drops? Absolutely. But I know I have some business owners and businessmen in here. What are you looking for over time? An increase, a growth. You're looking for every drop to be a little higher than the last drop. You're looking for every growth peak to be a little higher than the last growth peak. Over time. That's the Christian life.
For whether it's time to get rid of the truck or not.
Yeah, is it time to get rid of that truck? Okay, that's enough. I'm hooked into the Cheatums where they drove trucks until, not until they died, until somebody hauled them away. I've seen them crawl out of the window because the door no longer works, but they're still going to drive that truck. That is the Christian life, and the more that I'm exercising my objective view of morality and making right decisions, I will be able to look back, or should be able to look back over my life and say, you know what? I was here, now I'm here. Did I have some major drops in the meantime? You betcha. And the great news is that God says, this is called progressive sanctification, for those of you that want the big theological terms, is that God has promised that one day He's going to finish that off and make it complete. And you're going to enter into His presence 100% complete, never making a drop in sin again, ever. Is that the coolest news ever? That one day He's going to finish that process and say, you're done, you're complete. I'm going to make you back like I made Adam and Eve, which was the perfect design, but without the serpent. And now, remember there was 2 trees? Only one of them had an admonition. the other tree, the tree of life. He said, now, remember when we studied Revelation, they're not just one tree, they're everywhere. And he said, you'll be able to eat from that tree constantly, i.e., you will live forever perfect. The day is coming. Yes. Amen. Christians see the world as a place that suffers because of morally wrong choices. We see the world that misses the good that could have been if a morally right choice would have been made. And we see it as a place that needs the forgiveness found in Jesus. Knowing that people will make morally wrong choices because they will go into relativistic thinking and think, okay, this is okay for this reason. That's when we make those choices that in line. And the fun verse there is, and I'll think of it after I leave because that's when I remember all the cool stuff. But in Revelation, he gives this long list of just awful sins. And then the last phrase is, and all liars. And we go with, yes, murderers and adulterer and, sexually immoral and all this nasty list. And then he says, and all liars. Crap, he just brought in everybody else. Yeah, I haven't killed anybody, and I haven't done this, and I haven't done... A lot of us can go through that whole list, but then we get to that last one. And we do this moralistic, and we even have terms for it. We call them white lies. Or little white lies. We want to make them small. And we go into moral relativism. Your beloved spouse is laying in the hospital dying. You've just met with the doc. And he told you, this is it. Later today, tonight, maybe in the morning. There's a person you've shared your whole life with. And now you go in and they say, what'd the doc say?
You're going to be fine.
You're going to be fine.
It's going to be okay. What'd you just do? You lied. Why?
To pretend.
Moralistic relativism. Well, it's not important. They're going to die in a couple hours anyway.
I guess it's going to be okay because there'll be an heaven.
And if you're going to follow it up with that. But we don't do that. Moral absolutes are tough. But as you study the life of Jesus Christ, did he ever shy away once from a moral absolute? Did he do things gently and lovingly, as a good shepherd would? Absolutely. But we cannot live in a morally relativistic way, because then we will be constantly going,
Jesus Christ never had a mother-in-law who didn't know how to cook.
Well, that's true. Christians see God as a guide to avoid the pain of wrong choices and enjoy the good of right choices. And we see the Bible, his word, as the instructional tool for being able to how to figure that out. This is how we differentiate right from wrong. Christians also believe that non-Christians have real moral knowledge. You have to understand that. I have run into some atheists that are probably some of the most moral people I've ever known in my entire life. And there are all kinds of people who do not have a Christian worldview that can live a very good, air quotes, life. The reason for that is that all humans, whether they believe in God or not, remember this, they are made with the imago Dei, the image of God. And because they have the image of God built into their very core of their being, they are able to perceive, understand the moral features of life. Which is why there are some universal moral absolutes out there that everybody agrees to. Paul, writing to the church in Rome, acknowledged this. Romans chapter 2, verses 14 and 15. For when Gentiles who do not have the law, by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them. What Paul is saying is that people have the imago Dei and they are able to perceive moral absolutes to one degree or another. The difference is they can choose to ignore them, as can Christians because of a fallen nature. They can choose to go relativistic and say, well, for this instance, it's okay. So, although our moral sense is imperfect, we have a basic sense of morality that is built into our nature. So do not run around and think, well, and this is where pride comes in, well, I'm a Christian, therefore, of course, I have the true all-ending morals. Because I will tell you how many Christians I've arrested, including one of my former church's pastor's sons. That's a fun one. But moral absolutes are built into their hearts. When I dealt with criminal groups, gangs, guess what they had? Code of conduct rules. They had ethics for the gang. Now, the overall ethics of some of the stuff we might disagree with, but guess what happened if you crossed the moral lines of the gang? They judged you harshly. But all that tells me is that the imago Dei, the image of God, is real and living in every single human being on the planet. And brothers and sisters at Levine Baptist Church, if we don't see each other, much less see everybody out there as possessing the imago Dei, we too are going to go into moral relativism and make those bad choices of right and wrong. The two great commandments, love the Lord your God with your heart, strength, soul, and mind, and love your neighbors as yourself, requires seeing what God has made, the imago Dei, in others, and understanding that moral disputes may come up. But how do we make our moral choices? We make them because we are constantly looking at the moral rule book and studying the life of the guy who did it right. And now I can figure out right and wrong. And even if I get, the problem is, and you may have heard this little phrase, no good deed goes unpunished. You may do the right thing for the absolute right reason, and you may get absolutely trashed. But the final judge knows and has it all in control for the last day. Moral absolutes. We cannot live in moral relativism. As people with a Christian worldview, we have to know what is right and wrong, and then live that way far longer than we teach what's right and wrong. Because the old adage, again, our actions speak louder than our words. Bill, would you close this morning?
Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, Father. Thank you for your amendment. Thank you for your love that you show upon us each and every day, Lord. Father, thank you for today's lesson, Lord. I just thank you so much for the word of God. That is our instructions in life, Lord. I pray each day, Father, that we're able to open it and just use it as a map to live our lives, Lord. Whether many times it will stumble, we just know that you are doing the God. I just pray, Lord, that each and every day as we walk, we are the example of who you are, Lord. Thank you for Pastor Harry, Lord, and his time that he's put in, Lord. Lord, just his commitment and his love for everyone here, Lord. Lord, I just thank you for this body. Father, I just pray you put your hand upon today's service. And I just pray, Lord, you just really speak to the hearts of everyone there. And I pray, Lord, that they don't know you, that they'll come to the realization that they're not going to bring themselves to this life. Lord, you're just a wonderful Lord, and I just thank you so much for that, Lord. I want to thank you once again for this day. And in Jesus' name, there is no one. Amen.
Amen.